Good day, everyone. Hani from Critical Faculty here. Today, we are going to dive deep into the world of conspiracies. Why do you believe in them? Why some people think they are possible? Because they are possible, because they do happen. But for that, I'm going to need the very curious brain of my partner in crime, Bob Price.
Yeah,
Hello, Bob.
speaking of crazy conspiratorial things, it just occurred to me watching the intro sequence. It'd be great fun if you were to uh, patch in pictures so that on one side there's you and on the other side there's Bultmann or Einstein or Benjamin Franklin or whatever. That'd be great. Oh, yeah, we've interviewed them all.
Well, there are a few people still believe Hitler lives somewhere or lived somewhere in South America, in
Right.
Argentina, or at some point where he fled. And but you know what? I mean, let's start from the very beginning, uh, because conspiracies do happen. We know that do because we found out some. Few were
Yeah.
exposed. Waterloo. We know from history that people do conspire. There is such thing. Not every single incident of these are imaginary. They do happen. However, would it be reasonable? And I'm not going to put words in your mouth here. Would it be reasonable to exclude supernatural appeals?
Well, I heard or read just the other day someone commenting that you criticize something as a conspiracy theory, and you put somebody down as a conspiracy theorist. Well, how'd you like it if I called you a coincidence theorist? It doesn't mean anything. It just happened that way. I mean, that is sometimes just as contrived. Like when Hume said, to have adequate grounds to believe in a miracle, you'd have to determine that any other possible explanation for what somebody saw is even weirder than claiming it was a miracle. And so by default, okay, maybe so. Well, that's kind of what people are doing with some of these conspiracies that are horrible, and therefore so marginal that they do seem implausible, but there are a lot of things that seem improbable that turn out to be true. And it's not just a matter of statistics. And as you say, there are conspiracies. When I see somebody dismiss a theory as it's just a conspiracy theory, I start getting suspicious. Like you just said, there are conspiracies, right? I mean, what about what we know about the assassination of Abe Lincoln? Do you think that's a crack-brained, nutty thing? Because it sure seems like it happened. There are lots of conspiracies, so it's. I hate to say this, but if you dismiss something as a conspiracy theory, you're inviting people to think you're in on it.
Yeah, yeah, and there is middle ground. So I'll go back to my original question. Is it reasonable to dismiss theories that are built upon supernatural elements or realms?
Well, this gets into a tricky thing: how you define supernatural. If you mean like authentic um, paranormal events, however they're to be explained, I don't have any problem with that. It's conceivable that after all the research that Mulder and Scully do, that there's no mundane explanation at hand, and it may be that you should admit that. Well, I guess the universe is a lot bigger and deeper than I thought. But supernatural implies mythology. It seems to me it implies there are hidden forces that intervene in human life and in the course of nature, and I don't think there's really reason to believe that that's kind of like a God of the gaps thing. It's like saying, well, we don't, it's like turning your question into an answer. Like, what is it that causes so on? Well, it's the causation of so on. That's it's no answer. Like, gee, how'd the world get here? I guess God must have made it. You're just solving X by positing Z. That's not an explanation of anything. So, in that sense, I think the superstition, the supernatural thing, is a cop out. It's really no help. You're just basically, it's like when Origen said, God only knows who wrote the epistle to the Hebrews. Well, I'm sure he did think God knows, but his point is no human being knows this. If anybody does, it's God, and he's not telling what he knows. And often God language is just limit language. Just the show, it marks out the boundaries of what we know or what we're capable of.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is people usually equate supernatural to things that we don't understand or we know. Because let's say there are aliens. We found out there are aliens. What's supernatural about aliens? When you think about it, aliens means extraterrestrial, outside of, the Latin phrase literally means something to come from outside of Earth, right? What's wrong with that? If there are species like us who evolved on a different planet in a different solar system and ending up getting too curious, or somehow we got to meet each other, I don't see anything supernatural about that.
No. In fact, you stop me if you've heard this one before. I tend to be a big mouth and repeat myself all the time. The theories of Eric von Daniken and others that the gods the ancients claimed to have met were really advanced space aliens. And it was like Dr. McCoy in Star Trek IV when he traveled back in time to rescue Chekhov from the horrors of 20th century medicine in the hospital. We're dealing with medievalism here, Jim. It looked like that McCoy was doing miracles left and right, but he knew it was just advanced science. And so if you could go back to speak to a primitive person from Stone Age culture, tell me about your gods. And they say, well, they're people. They look kind of like us. They come from the sky in flying chariots. They have fire sticks and things that we can't match. It's amazing. They can deal death out at a whim, but they can heal the sick in ways we never could. They're our heavenly benefactors. If you said, I hate to pop your bubble, but you're talking about somebody like us from the future. If this is just science, we're like you. We just have the advantage of accumulating all this knowledge, and so we have spacecraft, we have deadly weapons, and even ray guns, and advanced medicine, but we can. We're born, we die. We're really not fundamentally different from you. So I'm afraid these gods, you've been misled. I think the person would say, well, what do you mean? What you just described is what we mean by gods. These guys, like the ancients, weren't Thomas Aquinas or Paul Tillich, right? All they meant, quote unquote, was that they're humanoids, but doing loads of stuff we can't, and they came from the sky. Well, so there you go. There's nothing supernatural about that.
Yeah. So, okay, we're agreement in this area here that maybe not supernatural, it's just natural phenomena that we yet to understand, things that we have not captured or grasped fully yet. That I would be agreeing on quite easy. There's a lot that we haven't discovered or figured out just yet. So once we figure them out, they're just part of the natural order, but we have just expanded our understanding of the natural order a bit more. However, we know that there are groups of people uh, who would like to exploit the ignorance of others. Because let's face it, what is a conspiracy? That's an orchestration of a certain scheme
Hmm.
to push a certain agenda, and you require an audience of gullible believers for that to work. And voila, you've got yourself a situation where you are pushed to believe a certain things while something else is happening in the background.
Hmm.
Uh, that happens, but it's whenever this is discovered, it's just a human manufacturing. It's us humans do that sort of thing for greed or for power or for whatever reason. But it's always whenever we found out there's a conspiracy, it's us humans behind us. There's no one else. So we'll start with your with the obviously you're a mythicist in a way. Do you think this sort of view, a theological view of a mythicist, appeals to a certain conspiracy, but it's nothing supernatural here. It's something manufactured by humans to push a certain agenda, and it was believed by many gullibles. Do you think that's the case?
I don't, but it's not impossible. We know that there were, well, at least the way they're represented by their critics, like Lucian had no patience for the messiahs and oracles, and he wrote about a couple of them. He wrote this fascinating thing about Alexander of Aboneutychus, who started a successful religion and had apostles spreading the gospel of his god Glycon, who was supposed to be an avatar of Asclepius, the healing god. And what he did was to set up a tent, and in the shadows, there he was with this big fake snake. With a kind of linen human mask, like a puppet over the face, manipulated with strings. And somebody would do the ventriloquism thing, and he would get the questions from people in line and have Glycon, as he called it, answer the questions. Well, was he actually a con man? Lucian thought he was. I don't know how he exposed him, but there were people like that were charlatans, and that's why you always have to worry about any impressive supposed miracle somebody does, because they're still doing stuff like this. I mean, look at any magician's act. You're left wondering, how the heck did he do this? They're not going to tell you, because that'd let the air out of the tire. So now that would be a conspiracy sort of a thing. But there are people that think Christianity began as a hoax type conspiracy. For instance, my late great friend Acharya S. Dolores Murdoch, she wrote a book called The Christ Conspiracy. And she didn't exactly mean it was a bunco scheme, but she did think it was created sort of like a new sitcom by a group of writers. And they combined different bits from different religions. I don't think there's any reason to believe that. It's not impossible, but it's really superfluous as an explanation. There are, like, non-mythicists like to reduce it to a conspiracy theory, like Holocaust denial. That's a common comparison. But I don't see that. And there is one version of it that would fit that, the Roman provenance idea, that the notion of a pacifistic, Roman-loving, peaceful Messiah who told Jews to give taxes to Caesar, don't begrudge him, obey the commands of Roman soldiers and all this, that this was a specially designed fictive Messiah that Romans created to pacify rebellious Jews. This is not absurd. There's some plausibility about that, but that would be a conspiracy theory, that the Romans and some Jews conspired to create the Christian Jesus. But the kind of mythicism I have always espoused is different. It just envisions the coming together of various streams from different ancient religions in an era where this was happening all over the place, with different religions borrowing from each other. And so that's what the version of it I favor. And I don't think anybody sat down to put this together. It's just one of the ancient religions, maybe the Osiris cult that changed names and got a few extra miracles and so on.
So that's brilliant, because that sums up probably most events. So some events are just naturally occurring. When you talk about conspiracy, you're talking about the intentional manufacturing and orchestration of a scheme to push a certain agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and these do happen, but they're not that frequent. The most frequent event is things naturally occurring without the intention of coming to a final product. They just emerge. They still require humans to intervene. They require humans to believe certain things that might not be possible, but that you end up with a narrative that is self-evident and self-evolving. Nobody's actually sat down and said, let's do that. It just happened to emerge. And that's most of the human affairs. I think they happen like that. What do you think?
Yeah. Now, sometimes someone will experience something or have a sudden flash of insight about natural phenomena that seems to explain it or give it meaning that nobody had thought of before. For instance, the Mithraic religion in the Hellenistic world, that appears to be based, that is the classic case of astrotheology. It was based on some people's interpretation of the shifting of the equinox or something. I can never keep that straight. From the constellation of Taurus, the bull, to the constellation of Perseus, and that Perseus was combined with Mithras, and for various reasons. A great book about this by David Ulansey, The Origin of the Mithraic Mysteries. Well, this wasn't a fraud, but it was simply a way of interpreting the celestial phenomena. Oh, I understand now. I see what's going on in the heavens and what that is telling us. That's a sort of revelation experience. It's not like somebody said, boy, I bet I can get these suckers to believe so-and-so. That would be a conspiracy.
Yeah. They even tried that with Christianity. You've got Moses. It was supposed to be the age of Arius. Because of the horn of the ram. That's the ram. That's Arius, and obviously Jesus is the age of Pisces because of the of his connection to the fish. And to date, the fish symbol is a symbol for Christianity.
Yeah, so that's exactly another one. Yeah.
There's always been that attempt. So conspiracies do happen, but they're far in between. They are not a daily occurrence. The most prevalent and the most frequent emergence of ideas and thoughts and positions are naturally evolving situations and beliefs that come together naturally and form a certain belief by a large number of people. And I'm completely in agreement with that. But if we start looking into, and I think we're going to get into the modern, thinking about a certain occurrence that's been happening in the last couple of years. We've all lived the situation. And by the way, I've been very, very careful naming the episode, because what's happening right now in the world of YouTube and the streaming, if you mention what we were talking about today and put it in the title, it will be categorized as misinformation, and it will be tagged and might actually end the stream. And rightly so, because imagine if some people are spouting some wrong information, and a couple of people are ill with the virus, and they get the wrong information, and they end up administering the wrong you know, medication, they could end up losing their life. So it's quite important that this needs to be sort of um, controlled in a way. By the way, in 10 minutes' time, there will be with us on the show a medical doctor who is going to take us through some of the science behind the virus that we're going to talk about. So you've alluded in the last conversation we have that, and I've got to be honest, you didn't say, "Oh, that's the case." You said there could be a possibility that the virus that we're having right now is not just a manufactured one, because that's might still be the case, but not even there. It's not even there. It's just a flu, and people are just exaggerating it and selling it and marketing it as a thing. And this is what I need to understand from you. Let's lean towards the conspiracy right now for a bit. What would be the advantages of pushing that particular agenda?
Well, it would be it has been a fantastic boon for the pharmaceutical companies. And there are aspects of it that make that more than simply a suspicion. I mean, you could say that, oh, well, I bet you they cook this up just to make money. Well, that's not an uncommon human motivation, but there are other extenuating things that make it look more than likely that that's what's going on. For instance, the crusade to discredit certain long familiar and effective drugs that are good and effectively therapeutic for this ailment, and but they're cheap. And if you wound up with this virus, you could take that stuff and you wouldn't have to risk some of the equipment that they put you on, and that some say makes it much worse. Well, why would they, if the pharmaceutical companies and their allies in Congress and the media were to if they didn't have some interest in falsely vilifying these legitimate medicines, why would they? I mean, it's not just that, oh, we're going to make a lot of money off the vaccine, but in order to make that happen, we're going to discredit falsely things that would not make us money but would help with the condition. Like, what could be the reason for that? I mean, if you dared to say, hey, drug A is not dangerous. It's never been dangerous. It's always been legal and approved, and it seems to work. Uh-oh, you're spreading disinformation. You're out of here. What is going on? That's not what scientists do, and certainly not what you'd expect from people that claim to be healers and manufacturers of beneficent medicine. And this urge to get everybody to take what I call the stab. Why is that? I mean, why this urgency that everybody must take it, or your persona non grata? I smell a rat. It just does not seem to me that this is what you'd expect.
So maybe I'll give you a couple of responses, and I invite Dr. Magdi now to start joining us into the studio if he's available. But maybe the answer to number one, you've heard about Pfizer, obviously one of the biggest pharmaceuticals in the world. Recently, they've announced that all the medication, all the COVID-19 vaccines are going to be dispensed to third world countries or underdeveloped countries at cost. Plus, obviously, the governments are buying them of the world, and they are given to the citizens for free. So if the governments are paying for them, you would think nations such as the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France will have enough intelligence to not be taken as a hostage for an orchestrated situation. You think they would have tried to verify the situation and not to be taken for a ride, unless they are part of the conspiracy. And if they are part of the conspiracy, why would they then pay for it and not recover the money from citizens, because it's provided for free?
Well, of course, they are being paid for it by the European governments. It's just that the people that they give it to are not doing the paying, but they're apparently, anybody's money is just as green as anybody else's. Plus, there's another possible agenda here. Bill Gates had, and some others had patented these very viruses a couple of years before they started doing trial runs for how would we deal with the pandemic that is surely going to come, and it'll surprise a lot of people, but not us. And these guys, especially Gates, is a depopulator, and vaccines for different maladies that he's so generously supplied in India and sub-Saharan Africa have resulted in big outbreaks of polio and even more importantly, female sterility. Now, is it just a coincidence that this guy and the whole Klaus Schwab gang think that the world population has to be, they're just like Thanos. They say we need to have 50% of the population done away with, without putting it so bluntly. I just cannot. And I've always gotten inspiration from the Twilight Zone, and one of my favorite episodes is where one aging professor is speaking to a youthful-looking colleague, a historian, whom he figures out must have been active during the Civil War. And he gets the guy to admit it and asks, "How old are you really?" And he says, "Well, I knew Plato personally." And so the older man is dumbfounded, but he said, "Now I'll believe anything." Well, that's what's happened to me. Up until fairly recently, I thought charges like this were ridiculous, but George Soros actually started the ball rolling for me. This guy is like a James Bond villain with tentacles reaching out to try to destroy law and order in this country, corrupt DAs, etc. And he's in bed with these other people that have similar plans. I don't think any of it is implausible anymore. Now, I'm at the mercy of the news from various channels. I'm not an expert, obviously, so I could be completely wrong, and I hope I am. But I'm now having to be very suspicious. I smell a bunch of rats.
Right. Firstly, I'd like to welcome my friend, Dr. Magdi. Hey, Dr. Magdi, how are you?
Oh, hi, Hani, and hi, Professor Price. Nice to be with you both today.
Great to be with you.
Same here, Professor.
Very good. We now have somebody who can have at least a scientific say on the matter, and so we're going to ask Dr. Magdi a few questions in the next couple of minutes. But I just want to quickly then address the second proposition, and Dr. Magdi can intervene here, I think, at the end of this, because this is important. The urgency of why you should take the step. I think the urgency is because the virus is highly contagious. If a virus is highly contagious and can be transmitted that quickly, the urgency stems from the fact that you can have the whole world sort of catching the virus in no time, and therefore was the urgency. And maybe this is where I will ask Dr. Magdi to address that question as well. Dr. Magdi, Bob was inquiring about what was the reason of the urgency of the medical or the political world for people that they must have the vaccination and so quickly? Why, in your medical opinion, why was that the case?
Uh, well, first of all, I have to say that I don't totally disagree with Dr. Price that there was a cheap medicine, namely ivermectin, which is like a medicine available for quite a long time, maybe more than 40 years. It was firstly introduced as an anti-parasitic medicine, like for various worms and parasites of the skin. It has been used successfully for treating a lot of parasitic ailments in Africa and elsewhere. And yeah, it's quite right that early in the pandemic, it there was some evidence, but I have to say it wasn't really studied in exhaustively to like have like a double blind controlled study, and there wasn't such a studies, but there was, let us say, anecdotes that this medicine could be effective in preventing the virus. However, you have to take it in larger doses that is currently approved, and take it weekly and for the foreseeable future. Like it doesn't offer protection as the vaccine. Like it's not you one shot and you are good to go. That's it, or two shots, whatever. But you have to take it every week, and the like the evidence that people say it's acting and it prevented the catchment of the virus is has to be taken in a larger quantity and bigger doses than it's let us say it's off-label use. And at some stage, people started to really acquire the medications. People who didn't want to like get vaccinated, and some people even hoarded the medicine to the extent that even here in Australia, there came a time where there was very big shortage of the medicine, and the government, like, for the medicine was initially could have been had of a script, like over the counter, but the hoarding and the like when a lot of people wanted to acquire the medicine and keep it and use it, whatever, they had to like put it back with a script, and the doctor has
So,
to
Dr. Mackey,
justify. Uh-huh.
we're talking about pre-vaccine development. This is the early stages, right?
Yes, yes, it was before the vaccine, and even after the vaccine, some people continue to use this. A glaring example of the proponent of ivermectin is Professor Brett Wiseman. Probably Dr. Price know him, of course. He was like quite a vocal advocate of this medicine. And yeah, I mean, there was people were really I agree, people who advocated the use of medicine. Nobody said don't research like the vaccine or the vaccine, like, I mean, I'm talking about moderate voices, like not the anti-vax movement and stuff like that. People who were like debating the use of this cheap medicine were putting forward the argument that why not, allow the use of this medicine, or make it available for people who doesn't want to get vaccinated. One of the anecdotes they put forward is the virus wasn't quite rampant in Africa, and despite the less than favorable health measures, obviously, in a lot of African
Sorry,
countries.
Dr. Maggi. There is a bit of crackling in the sound from your end, hopefully.
Uh,
Yeah.
am I clear now?
We can hear you clearly, but there's a bit of crackling sound in the background that suddenly started to happen in the last minute or so.
Okay. How about now? I haven't changed anything. Am I clear now? Loud and clear?
Yeah, we can hear you. Just a slight crackling, but that's all right. Don't continue.
Yeah. So there was like a legitimate like concern why this medicine wasn't like allowed, or why it was whoever suggested that this can work wasn't really treated with the same I guess favorable treatment to the people who advocated getting a vaccine right from the start. So there is a point, I agree with Dr. Price, that this raised a lot of eyebrows. But again, if we can jump from that to the conclusion that this
But
is
Dr. Magdi,
conspiracy.
before we finish this point, so
Mhm.
was that medication ever proved to actually be effective against the virus?
No, it hasn't been. That's the point. Everyone, you have to like put it in context here. The whole world was in a panic, and there wasn't like enough time to do like a randomized controlled trial, multi-center, and acquire metadata, and there wasn't such studies done. It was more or less. How to put it? It's like anecdotes. Like people said that this medicine has been tried in previous viral diseases and proved that it offers protection. And people,
But what I'm wondering here, because remember the vaccine took close to a year to develop, and while
yes,
we had nothing, there is a medication that some people are saying it works, and yet we still have nothing. Why was that medication blocked from getting into a proper scientific trial?
that's a very good question, but well, it would have taken a long time to do such studies. Studies take long time and take money, and I guess in the judgment of epidemiologists, if I can talk on their behalf, even if this medicine would have proved to be effective, it didn't offer the protection to the degree the vaccine would have offered. By that, I mean, you can't rely on people or the goodwill of people to take the medicine or forget it. It needs a lot of compliance. You can't apply it on a wide range. And it's not for the long haul. You need to take the medicine for forever, you know what I mean? Or at least until the pandemic declared null and void. But the vaccine is just one or couple of shots, 3 shots at least up until now. Everyone seemed to be getting by 3 shots. Some people even advocated the 4th shots for a quite selected number of patients when the north hemisphere winter approach. But anyway, like we're talking 2 to 3 shots on average of the vaccine versus a medicine which you have to take each week for basically the foreseeable future. And the minute you stop taking it, you have no immunity. You see the difference between it and the vaccine?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm playing the devil advocate. So I mean, it's definitely the vaccine in terms of public health is more superior to the medicine. However, I get Dr. Price's point quite exactly, that people who didn't want to take the vaccine shouldn't have been demonized or should have been allowed to take this medication, and the studies into this medication should have been started along the vaccine just in case for people who proved allergic to the vaccine, or who didn't want to take the vaccine, or who had serious effect with the first dose of the vaccine, can be offered an alternative. This didn't happen. I don't know why, but I mean, you can make your own interpretation. But yeah, this is I'm just stating the facts. Yeah.
Dr. Price,
But let me again just emphasize this point. In terms of public health and in terms of the wider community, definitely the vaccine is the way to go, because, as I said, you can't rely on the people compliance and goodwill to take the medicine. And remember, in a pandemic, it's not about the health and well-being of an individual. It's about the health and the well-being of a whole community, entire nation, and even the whole, world. So, I mean, it's a different perspective when you are putting a health policy. You don't look from the individual, point of view, or the individual freedom. I'm afraid these things doesn't get much weight when you are facing risk of a pandemic. Yeah.
Dr. Price, you seem to have a question for.
Yeah, please fire away. Yeah.
Well, they continued to harangue people about why aren't you getting the second and third and fourth shots, when the very fact that you needed them implied that it was no different from the ivermectin thing, that it wasn't what they said it was, that it would get rid of the problem. And there were still all sorts of anecdotal but worrisome reports of bad side effects. And I never got the vaccine and don't intend to. But because I feel like I'm not taking that risk. It could be hysteria, but then again, it's possible the whole thing was marketed to be hysteria. And it's no accident that it made possible the disastrous election of Biden. The way they changed the rules for counting votes and all that, it was predicated on us being in the pest zone, as if the Black Plague were raging. You wouldn't dare show up to vote. So there are various things that make me think that this was, from various standpoints, a kind of a hoax. Not that there was some people even deny there is a COVID virus, because they say you cannot identify which virus it is, just like HIV. It was the name of several different viruses, and nobody ever came up with which one is the one that causes AIDS, if any. Some say that about this. Now, I admit I am just Mr. Ignorant here. I'm only going by these things that raise my suspicions, because that's, I don't have 40 hours in a day to do all the necessary research. But boy, from what I hear, it sounds dubious to me. And one last thing, they kept saying that you should distance yourself and wear masks indoors and outdoors, though they admitted that it didn't do any good and actually deprived people of fresh air and so forth. It was conflicting messages, so that the kind of thing that produces schizophrenia in young kids when they hear conflicting messages from different parents. And I think that either the people in charge were utter morons, which seems to be the case in the government today. You have to fail an intelligence test to get a cabinet post, and they or the pharmaceutical companies have ulterior motives, and I want nothing to do with it. I'm really happier to take the risk of not adopting the sacramental Biden mask.
So, Dr. Magdi, let me just unpack all these statements and formulate some questions, because they are very good, and that will lead us to track the whole thing from the beginning. Now, We know that this whole thing broke out of the Wuhan region in China. And this is going to be the first question. Is there any genomic sequence that happened to the virus that would show any signature of manufacturing over naturally occurring? Or is there such thing in viruses at all? Would you be able to know from the genomic sequence of a virus whether it's man-made or naturally occurring?
Yes, the first answer is yes. There is a markers or in the genome by which you can figure out that this is not a product of nature. If it is entire, again, let me state a very important point. We are talking about, like extreme here. Like, I mean, if someone, and it hasn't happened till now, but if someone was so clever that he designed a virus synthetically and, just put all the jigsaw puzzle of the genome of that virus in a way that it would look like has been done by the nature, well, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But with a branch in virology called bioinformatics, they can now like study a genome of any virus and can really track the virus, paracentically saying evolutionary, where it came from, how long has it been in the in nature, whether it like passed some intermediate host and so forth. So this kind of information are within the ability of virologists and scientists. So the first answer to your question, yes, the virus really doesn't have any hallmarks of a synthetic virus. It's natural virus, and it doesn't seem that it has been weaponized or it's like a synthesized with the aim of causing a pandemic or hurting someone. Having said that, this is different from the question whether the virus came absolutely from nature or was introduced to like the community by a lab spillover. And so lab spillover, which is gaining momentum now, it doesn't say that the virus is synthesized. It just says that the source of the virus is from Wuhan Institute of Virology lab. But it doesn't say they have manufactured the virus. They were studying this virus, and this is a well-known fact for everyone. They were studying the coronavirus for many years, more than basically since the SARS Mark 1 2003, and they have these virus samples and stuff like that, and they tinkered with it. I mean, without getting into details what they did or didn't do, but at the end of the day, if the virus has leaked from them through one of their personnel or by sampling error or accident or whatever, that doesn't mean that the virus is synthetic. It means that it's just a virus they were working with, and they failed the bio safety measures and got introduced in the community. In this case, we're talking about Wuhan city in Hubei, I guess it's called Hubei province in China.
So, Dr. Magdi, you're saying that you can take in a lab a naturally occurring virus and tinker with it to maybe push its evolution or do something with it, but it's a naturally occurring virus, and then you add some elements or you subtract some elements from it to direct it in a certain way. Is that right?
That's gain of function.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that's the gain of function. I mean, there's a lot of talk now about whether whatever the Wuhan Institute did is categorized as a strict gain of function like experiment or not. It's a lot of controversy and like adgy about that. But I mean, if you want to be very liberal, or I guess whatever you can describe it, and say, yeah, this is constitute a gain of function, whatever they did can be categorized as gain of function. Yes, they did some experiment with the virus. I'm not saying this, they did it with the SARS-2, which is the COVID-19 virus. I mean, the disease is called COVID-19, but the virus, the name of the virus is SARS-CoV virus 2. So the point is, nobody is saying that whatever they were doing with their virus is definitely categorized as gain of function, but they did some tinkering. They
But
haven't.
Dr. Magdi, would you agree then? Would all of us three agree that it's improbable that they would have leaked it on purpose, considering the amount of damage that happened to that nation on the back of it?
Yeah, I have no evidence, of course, but I can just out of common sense absolutely say that if it leaked from them, it would turn out to be an accident. There's no one in the right mind would have leaked this virus intentionally. They gained nothing of it. In fact, the fact that if there is such cover up, which we would discover in the future, means that it took them by surprise. It caught them off guard. So there is no intention. It's just happened contrary to their will. You can accuse them of being negligent, not taking the biosafety standard to the extreme. You can accuse them of many things, but not being malicious and leak the virus intentionally. I wouldn't definitely say this is a valid point at all. But we have to remember that we haven't proved that at all, because, and I'm afraid this, even in the future, we could never, there is a potential that we could never find the answer, because remember that unfortunately this happened in China with all the political cover up and the Chinese government attitude. There's a lot of data which has been censored right out from the start. A lot of voices which tried to diverge information was censored or even imprisoned. So I give you that. But so whether the samples, the data, some research protocols which data has been destroyed or censored forever, that could be the case, and we might never find the answer. But the fact that this is a probability, I give you that. It's a probability that the virus has leaked from the institute. Whether this is a synthetic virus, I think this has been studied in exhaustion, and there is no evidence so far that this virus is totally a synthetic virus. Could have been manipulated. Yes, there is some red flags which say that this virus has been manipulated, or let me put it in another way. The virus had some properties which can raise some doubt about whether it's acquired all this property naturally right from the outset, or it has been introduced to the virus in the lab. So that can be something we can consider. But
so, Dr. Magdi, the second question that came from Bob's remarks was: is there a way that we can tell the SARS-2 virus, because it was alleged that with HIV there are many contributors that you can't tell them apart? Can the scientists tell and pinpoint the markers of this virus, and that is not just the flu or an influenza or some other general ailment?
Yeah, 100% with the genomic analysis of any virus for that matter, not only coronaviruses. We can tell exactly the makeup and the genes of the virus. And this virus genomics has been revealed to the world. And, one of the people who was instrumental in releasing the genome of the virus is actually an Australian guy. And it has been revealed against the will of the Chinese government, but it was released quite early in the pandemic, and I guess on the 12th or the 13th of January 22. So by that date, we knew exactly what the virus is, its nature, its type, its DNA sequence, everything you want to know about the virus was revealed on the 12th of January 2020. And moreover, Moderna, which ended up doing one of the vaccines for the virus, together with virus most commonly used one, at least in the Western world, on the following day of the release of the COVID genome, has designed a vaccine. You can, I know it's very, very strange, but they designed the vaccine on the following day. It took only 24 hours to design the vaccine. I'm not saying making the vaccine. They just put, if I might say, the blueprint of the vaccine for the COVID, for the SARS-2 virus, based on the genomic information, which was only 24 hours before on public record. So 100%, we know the virus, we know the genome of it, we know how many genes, we know how many virus proteins, everything, every last bit of information about the virus we know, and it's definitely a coronavirus. It's different from the influenza virus. It's different, species altogether of virus. It's the only thing that share with the flu virus is both what we call RNA viruses, but they are quite two different species, and they both affect the respiratory system among other organs. But this is where the similarity ends. It's definitely not a flu.
Right. And was the panic worth it? I mean, does it actually kill you? Can it kill you?
Yeah, 100%. It can kill you. Yeah, and I mean, I've seen it, firsthand experience. I've seen people dying from the virus. Yeah, I've seen it in the hospital I work for. People admitted with COVID, and unfortunately, they didn't make it. Yeah, it can kill, potentially. It won't kill everyone. It shows the victim that would succumb to the virus, mostly elderly people, mostly people who had comorbidity with not less than perfect immune system. Yeah, and definitely these people are more prone to not make it when they catch COVID. But some people can catch COVID and remain asymptomatic. I mean, that's the other end of the spectrum. So yeah, you can get the infection and don't know anything about it and pass it to others, or it can kill you.
Yeah.
Both are correct.
And it seems to be like when you examine history, it's not something crazy out of the blue. It seems that humanity experienced that every 100 years or so. There is a virus that mutates beyond our control and end up sort of harvesting few lives. And this has happened before. This is not the first occurrence of such a thing.
Yeah, the last pandemic of a huge proportion was, I guess, the Spanish flu. But just as a reminder, back in 2003, there was SARS Mark 1, which fortunately wasn't as infectious as this one, and it was more deadly. It has a really high mortality rate. Like it killed 1 in 4 of the people who got the virus. Where here the mortality of this coronavirus Mark II is maybe like the worst is like say 5%. But yeah, it's of course it's different from one place or one population to another. But yeah, so back in 2003 we were lucky that the SARS-1 wasn't out of proportion to the degree of causing a pandemic, but we could have ended up in a pandemic. So that's one. In 2006, there was another corona pandemic, what's called the MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. The epicenter was in Saudi Arabia and Emirates, United Arab Emirates. And fortunately, again, it was a very deadly virus, even worse than the SARS-1. But again, we were lucky it wasn't quite contagious, and they could get it under control pretty quickly. And by the way, it was like the first or the primary vector, as we say, is the bat, and the intermediate vector or the animal that people catch it from is the camel. That's the Middle Eastern one. And so that's as far as coronavirus is concerned.
So, Dr. Magdi, do you think then that the reason why this was kind of a threat is not because of its mortality ratio, but because it was highly contagious? So therefore, a 5% mortality that spreads all over the world will still have potentially more victims than something that has a 25% mortality, yet it's not as contagious.
Yeah, nominally speaking, like in absolute numbers, yeah, you could end up with more people dead if it, ran rampage among the 7.5 billion people habitating the planet. So yeah, in absolute terms, it could have, wreak more havoc. But it's definitely more contagious. But I'm just trying to say that we were lucky back in 2003, 2006, and even in 2009, we had the swine flu, and the epicenter was in the States, United States. So, but I mean, we were lucky that in each of these 3 episodes, it didn't reach the stage of a pandemic. Like the infection was controlled quite quickly, and people didn't cover up, and this is when we can talk about what the initial or the first few days of the pandemic and what was done wrong. We can talk about that. But yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, I'm saying it happened only in the past 2 decades, like 3 times. The fact that we were lucky and didn't up with a pandemic doesn't mean that when we have a pandemic, it's a conspiracy, if I might say.
Dr. Price, do you have any other comments or questions? It's a good opportunity for us to have Dr. Magdi in the studio. So this is a good chance for you to find out a lot more if you want to about this situation.
Well, I have seen a couple of times a woman whose name I cannot remember. She's Chinese and worked in the lab and said that it was definitely manipulated in the lab and it was intended to be a bioweapon. Now, they may have blundered and allowed it to escape. I'm willing to believe that. But the fact that they quarantined Wuhan and even sealed people in their homes, welding the doors shut to starve them to death. I think the depth of what the Chinese Communist Party will do is yet to be plumbed. So nothing would surprise me. It's like their buddy Stalin said, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, and they got billions of eggs they don't mind breaking. And the fact that they kept they tried to control it in the zero zone, but did not stop people from China going traveling all over the world. It shows that they were aiming it at the rest of us as a bioweapon. And it seems to me it would be extraordinary reasoning to come up with another reading of the situation.
But don't you think, Dr. Price, if they are going to do so, how are they going to protect themselves from that weapon that they have developed themselves? Wouldn't they be the first nation to come up with a vaccine, or they should have had a vaccine for themselves?
Well, they claimed they did early on. We claim it didn't work, but they said they had one, as Russia did. Maybe they did, but I know they claimed it very quickly.
Okay, let me step in. First of all, the reason why everyone is interpreting China zero COVID policy is just a political propaganda. They are doing it for political propaganda in an attempt to show the world and their own population that they are better at controlling the virus than the Western nation. So I guess that is a good enough, reason why this absurd policy of zero COVID, they are insisting upon it up until this day. But mind you, Dr. Price, this came to a huge price to them. As you said, there is a lot of people who are discontent with the policy. A lot of people were trapped in their home, even starved. There was a lot of economic upheaval. So it's not that they weaponized the virus and got scare-free. If they did, they are very stupid because they shot themselves basically in the foot. So, but I'm giving you an explanation why they are insisting of zero COVID, not because they are really know something we don't know about the virus. It's because they are just stupid and want to pretend to their population that we are superior to this, bullshit Western nation who couldn't control the virus. So I hope that can be a good enough answer.
Oh yes, I think you're right.
Yeah. As far as the second question about the vaccine, yes, they did have a vaccine, and their vaccine is different from the one we have in the Western world. The one we have in the Western world was just taking one bit of the virus, which is called the spike protein, and reverse engineering it and making, and this is a very important part of the virus because this is the key the virus uses to put it to our cells as the lock and open the cells and invade it. So this is the vaccine that the Pfizer and Moderna and what they call the RNA vaccine. Their vaccine was to take the whole virus, kill it, and then make an antibody against the whole virus, not only the spike protein, which is the part that the virus used to sort of invade the cell. Now, having said that, again, because of their lack of transparency, nobody at the start knew whether it's effective or not. But now there is anecdotal evidence that their vaccine is effective, but after the third dose, not the second dose as the Western vaccine. Like you need to take 3 shots of their vaccine, but ultimately, ironically, it offers more protection, more long-lasting protection if you take the Chinese vaccine, compared to 2 shots of the RNA vaccine, the Pfizer and Moderna sort of pioneered. So at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. But they had a vaccine, but they didn't have it to start. They have to work on it during the pandemic. That's 100% the case. And they were investigated by the intelligence community in the USA, and nobody, like really doubted that they could have done it as it's not even a concern that they have like made the virus, disseminated it, and got scot-free. Everyone knows that they paid a price like everyone else in the world, but there's zero COVID policy. I give you my explanation as far as my
As you know,
understanding.
guys, Shanghai is just coming out of almost a 2 months lockdown,
Yeah.
where so it's a huge region and very important region. It's the biggest port, ocean freight in the world of supply chain and logistics. It's causing a lot of problems in terms of the world supply chain, and they were the victims of that. So I am very, I don't
I'll be
think it
very
was.
skeptical,
Yeah,
to think that they like they did it on purpose, and they went to a very like long distance to do this zero COVID in spite of not really showing evidence that it worked. It has been tried before in Hong Kong just a few months ago. It didn't work. And they even locked people inside the factory to avoid the total economic collapse. All these measures tells me that they really wasn't doing it out of malice. It's just out of ideology rather than they they have they were privy of secret information. They know about the virus that we didn't know, and it's just all political game. I guess the Politburo is re-electing Xi Jinping or whatever this year or later, I don't know. And they want to demonstrate themselves as more competent than the Western system. Basically, this is what it is.
yeah.
And I'm quite convinced about that, personally speaking.
That makes
You're
sense.
right.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Now, getting to that one, which is people who choose not to take the vaccine. And obviously, there is a bit of freedom that needs to be exercised and given to humans for that sort of thing. But don't you think, and Dr. Magdi, you mentioned that, people, maybe we should have treated these people differently. However, if this thing is highly contagious, what is your position? If this thing is highly contagious and there are people, obviously, we're going to exclude those who are compromised, those who cannot to take the vaccine for obvious reasons. Not that they don't want to take the vaccine, they cannot take the vaccines. So these are excluded from this conversation. But those who don't want to take the vaccine on the back of a conspiracy theory, or maybe they're anti-vaxxers to start with. They thought all vaccines and medication are something to control people, or they only want natural stuff to enter their bodies for whatever reason. What do you think, medically speaking, and speaking about the group of people, not the individuals? Individual rights needs to be respected, but what would you do in a pandemic like this, where if some people choose, want to have nothing to do with the vaccine, how would they affect the community, and how they should be treated?
Okay, I'll tackle your question in two different ways. Medically speaking, offering the vaccine to everyone who could have the vaccine safely is really not a choice. It's a must. The reason being is if you offer the vaccine on opt-in or opt-out basis, you don't reach what we call a herd immunity. And the herd immunity is necessary to achieve two goals. First of all, to protect those in the community who can't take the vaccine and will rely on healthy people taking the vaccine and not acting as a asymptomatic, passing around for the virus. And secondly, is if you want to achieve extension of the virus, there is no other way than to mass immunize the whole population. So these are, medically speaking, the reason why everyone who is capable should take the vaccine. Having said that, I can see the point in people talking about their personal freedom and personal rights and all. I'm a libertarian myself, so I can prescribe to like the freedom or people who wishing not to, their freedom being taken away from them to exercise the right of what gets inside their body. I can totally understand their point, and I can even empathize or sympathize with them, but in the interest of if I might say the good of the whole population, it's not an option. I'm afraid. I mean, you can't achieve really a good control of the pandemic. You can't achieve extension of the virus and offer a herd immunity which will protect vulnerable people who can't take the vaccine for medical reason without mass vaccinating the whole population. So that's the medical answer. With the freedom or the personal sort of what is the from a personal view, what is right, what is like human rights and all this. Yeah, that's all valid question, and it shouldn't be sort of brushed away or everyone talking about it is demonized. But I mean, you can recall, Hani, the episode of the Australian Open, and when Djokovic came, and he wasn't vaccinated, and the saga that went along with this story. I mean, it's a debate whether you have the right to stop him from getting in the country and competing because he's not vaccinated and he can pose a risk, or he has every right not to get vaccine. And if he has the right to get the vaccine, don't you have the right to prevent him from coming into the country? All these are open questions, but yeah. Medical speaking, I think
This is in terms of when it comes to celebrities, you have a lot of things now coming into play, like politics and media, and it really distorts reality. It becomes inflated and becomes areas of.
It's just I agree. I'm just using it as an example when the debate came to the surface whether you have the right not to take the vaccine and still exercise, all the rights, like go and compete, and go to a restaurant, go to a movie. Mind you, just a few months ago there was a vaccine passport. People who didn't have this vaccine passport were prevented from going to concert, to going to theater, to movies, to restaurant. We only sort of obviated the need for the vaccine passport when we reached like more than 95% immunization rate. So this is just to make my point that once you have you vaccinated the mass, you can start to sort of relax the rules or the regulations, which can sound a bit draconian.
What is then the reasonable stance? I mean, I'll ask Dr. Price here to intervene. And from your point of view, Dr. Price, let's say now the science is all, this chat is leading towards, okay, there's a genuine virus, there's a genuine pandemic that happened. Nobody meant for this to take place, but it's happened. People die because of this. But there are some people who choose not to take it for whatever reason. What do you think would have been the reasonable approach by governments, considering that if you're not going to take it, there's a very, very high likelihood that you might catch it and then pass it on? What do you think then would have been or should be the reasonable approach of a compromise, of trying to work things out within the different groups of humans?
Strangely enough, I think of Aquinas's reason for saying that priestly celibacy was okay. It was according to the will of God, despite the fact that God wants people to reproduce and be fruitful and multiply. And he says the reason for this is that it's statistical. Anybody knows that it's only a tiny minority of people that will voluntarily embrace celibacy. So there's nothing to worry about. In fact, you're never going to see a day when there's this huge fad of voluntary celibacy. Well, I think if you believe that the vaccine would make you immune and that you couldn't spread it or get it from anybody, which is what they seem to have said to begin with, though now it turns out it's not true. But if that were true, then if there were a minority of stubborn old cusses like me who refused to take it, well, who's really going to be in any danger because all of them have taken the vaccine? So I think it's kind of a moot point. And plus, they've never really adequately tested it, and I understand why. It was an emergency thing, the warp speed.
Yeah.
But
what about this? What about
I'm not taking that risk.
What about this, Bob? I mean, by the way, the vaccine you're not immune from. You can still catch COVID-19 while having but your likelihood of having complications or dying because of the virus is very, very, very slim. But remember that there's a third group of people, those who cannot take the vaccine because they can't. They are compromised and they can't take it for health reasons. And this is the group that we're talking about here. They didn't choose to. They would love to take it, but they were recommended against it. And these are the people that we're talking about here. So if some people choose not to, especially on the back of misinformation, choose not to take the vaccine, wouldn't they then compromise people who cannot take the vaccine even though they want to?
You mean they would be spreaders and make it more likely that those who want to take it but cannot will get sick with it?
Correct.
I don't believe in making the exception into the rule. And I think there are many wrong-headed liberal policies that do just that. The gun control fiasco that's happening now. Most gun crimes are committed with stolen guns. Well, let's make sure that it's very difficult for law-abiding citizens to get guns. What are you doing? It's like you're locking down the wrong people. Well, you can't make the exception into the rule, and I think that's what would be happening if you said, on the off chance that somebody like me is not going to get on board with this, and I might conceivably get it and spread it. Anything's possible. I mean, are you going to outlaw cars because there are car accidents? I don't think it's worth restricting freedom, especially when there are serious doubts about what the vaccination will do to those who get it. It's a gamble, and I'm not making that bet.
Yeah. Dr. Magdi, what's on the same topic? What do you think?
Yeah.
How do we deal with it?
Well, I tend to agree with Dr. Price that you shouldn't make the exception be the rule. However, if you are like a politician or a health policy maker, you got to be in their shoes. They can't tell people right from the outset, well, we know that if we tell you don't take the vaccine, only a small part will, for whatever reason, will not take the vaccine, and the majority will opt in for the vaccine. Therefore, the point is moot. I get the argument he put about the celibacy, and that's totally a valid point, and I can't agree more with him that this is the case. But with health policy, I'm not sure whether if you offer the people the freedom right from the outset and said to them, okay, whoever want to take it, take it. At the end of the day, mind you, like people who were coerced into taking the vaccine were quite a small group of the whole population. Like we're talking, for example, in Australia, I can't talk for all countries, but in Australia, they only forced, the cops, the teachers, you remember the construction workers when they did this huge unrest a few months ago. You remember that? About
Yeah.
the obligation to take the vaccine. So at the end of the day, people who were, forced to take the vaccine were just a selected group of the population, not everyone. Of course, health workers, people who, like myself, who were in this group, who were not forced, but I mean, quite encouraged and for obvious reason to take the vaccine. People who work with the aged care personnel were prevented from, looking after aged people for obvious reason. So these people who are, forced to take the vaccine, but the majority at large, majority of population, wasn't forced to take the vaccine. So that's one point again to remember. Secondly, the vaccine, yeah, I agree. There is a long-term consequence to the vaccine which nobody knows, because simply there wasn't enough time for it to reveal itself, and even the approval of the vaccine by all the sort of the regulation authority has agreed to indemnify the vaccine companies against long-term, not short-term, long-term effect of the vaccine for obvious reason. So I give Dr. Price that, and I give him his concern that there might be a long-term, side effect or consequences which we don't know about, and we will never know about except with passing of time. Again, agree with that. So I mean, this all these points are very relevant and very good point, and I have nothing to disagree with. Just one more thing Dr. Price raised at the beginning about the contradicting message that people got early on in the pandemic. That's true. It happened. It was really very bad. A lot of contradicting advice has been given to people, partly because of incompetence, partly because of lack of information, and partly for ulterior motive. And I'm going to spell it out. Like early on, the recommendation was against the mask, where with the introduction of the Delta and Omicron variant, everyone was talking about how mandatory the mask is. And there is a good reason to believe that this was done early on, because we were caught off guard and there wasn't enough mask to cater for everyone in the population, especially for people like myself in the front line. And we have seen it. We've seen shortages of the PPE, with the personal protection equipment. Very early on, we have seen the hand sanitizing gel sold for like $150 for a liter. We have seen all that because the world was caught off guard. But once all these things has been ramped up in production, the policy sort of shifted or changed, or the advice was, reversed upside down, and rather than don't use the mask, now you have to use the mask. And people, if you are not using a mask in public transports or indoors, were fined basically. So I mean, that behavior can raise doubt in people who
So, Dr. Magdi, we were talking early on about the conspiracy one that has been orchestrated from the very beginning with certain targets. Don't we? And Dr. Price and I sort of agreed that most of the human affairs fall under naturally occurring things, and then few groups start exploiting certain situations within the new narrative to suit certain agendas. So, could we then say that the emergence of the virus was an accident? It was natural. However, after it became a reality, certain groups of people have pushed certain agendas on the back of the virus. So if you're politically sort of tuned towards a certain position, this is your chance to push a certain agenda on the back of the new narrative. And that's how most human affairs occur. Do you think that this is more is the situation rather than something been orchestrated from the very beginning?
100%. I agree 100% with that premise, with that proposal. Definitely. Personally speaking, I tend to believe that the situation was exploited by people only after it had happened, not as a premeditated thing, or they hadn't have the foreknowledge or conspired to cause it. But definitely, as soon as it happened, some people rushed and manipulated the situation to their advantage, whether politically, whether financially, whether to drive a certain agenda, social, health-wise, political, you name it. I agree with that 100%. Definitely.
Fair enough. I mean, that's what do you think, Bob, now about this narrative? Does it sort of sits well with you in this kind of situation we're talking about?
It's like what's his name? He was Clinton. Rahm Emanuel said, "Never let a crisis go to waste." Well, that is explicitly saying, let's exploit this thing. And I think global warming, climate change is another one. There may be something to that scientifically, though I doubt it. But AOC's former right-hand man publicly admitted that the Green New Deal really was not motivated by ecological concern. It was just a clever way of gaining control of the economy and pushing it toward socialism. Well, that's a classic case of that, as was the Democrats' manipulation of voting rules, ostensibly because you didn't want to go outside and catch COVID by actually voting in person. That's just a lot of baloney, and you see the result of it.
Thank you for always giving me the hint for our next chat, because climate change might be the one next, and I will invite an expert with us in the studio. I think this is great. It's we're getting information, we're discussing things, and what I love about you, Bob, is you put yourself about. You're listening to information, you're filtering the information. You think some are reasonable, some are not. You're taking some new information. That's all brilliant. I guess I want to conclude with a couple of things. I want to take a couple of questions here, but maybe if we can all have a stab at this, no pun intended. And the Constellation Pegasus super chat, thank you for that. Why is China not being punished for COVID by the world community for millions of dollars lost in economics and lives lost? Is it also true China kicked us out, then the COVID breakout started? What do you think? How should the world stand against China?
Well, there are so many things they have done, like the fentanyl thing. That comes from them and is a weapon pointed at a whole generation of American kids who unfortunately are too stupid to realize the danger they're in. But that is also a Chinese assault on us. And all of the COVID stuff, it goes back to them. Why aren't we doing anything about it? Well, the explanation is quite simple. China has bought off all of the government leaders, Democrat and Republican. They don't mind getting rhetorically raked over the coals occasionally, because you have to keep up the pretense that you're not mere puppets of China, but they all are. Mitch McConnell, all these people. How about Swalwell and these people? They're all mere pawns of the communist government of China. So no wonder nothing is ever done. They let it be known to these people with veiled threats that we know you're dirty linen. If you don't want it exposed, you'd better cool it on opposing us. And so, I mean, that seems absolutely clear. That's the reason Biden has the tiptoeing through the tulips foreign policy. He doesn't dare really oppose people. You think he's going to lift a finger to defend Taiwan? Not a chance. And so I think the answer to that is simple.
Yeah. I'm going to say my bit, and I'll invite Dr. Magdi to also comment on this one here. I think humanity made a mistake several decades ago by outsourcing all manufacturing to one country. It's always going to be a problem, not just because you're handing over power of the know-how and how to manufacture and do things, but you lose as a culture and as a community the know-how. For the United States or for Australia to start remembering how to manufacture again and lose that sort of exporting opportunity. And when you learn how to do things yourself, it's completely different than outsourcing. We've exploited, and that's because of a certain greed as well. 40 or 50 years ago, China was very cheap to manufacture. And we thought by outsourcing all our problems, like manufacturing and actually having to work hard for your lifestyle, plus exporting garbage and recycling and stuff, forgetting that we live under the one sky, so it doesn't matter. It's like spitting out of a window where the car is driving. It will come and hit you back in the face. So this is, I think, what happened, and I think we're reaping our initial greeds of and stupidity, because now we don't know how to do stuff, and they do, and that's going to have a huge price. They're basically running a monopoly at the moment, and we were part of it as other countries. And I think we need to quickly bring some industries back and learn how to do things ourselves. What do you think, Dr. Magdi?
I have I'll answer Constellation Pegasus in a different way. The short answer is no. People cannot sue China and cannot punish China for few reasons. First of all, as Hani and Dr. Price mentioned, we outsource a lot of capacity, be industrial, research, dirty recycling, a lot of things. We outsource it to China, and the trend is beyond control now, that we can't flip the switch and take it back. So China is mastering a lot of capacity over the Western world, and certainly can harm the Western system in a big number of ways that we can never imagine until it happens. So that's the first point. The second point is China is very good at blame shifting and mud raking. And a glaring example of that when people started to ask a serious and very good questions about the source of the virus, not that it's synthetic or not, just the source, whether it came from nature, as they said, from the Wuhan wildlife market, or it has leaked by accident from the lab. The first responses, they said, we think COVID is an American-made virus. It came from Maryland laboratory, and they incriminated even Ralph Britt, who's working in the same domain of research in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So they they blame shifting the problem and the fact that the pandemic started in Wuhan and started to throw mud at everyone. And you can wonder if America, of course, doesn't want to get all the attention to, for example, virology research facility at Maryland, whether there is some classified things happening in this lab, so they don't want to start the talk about it. Like, for example, they can tell them, oh, you have to open the Wuhan Institute. They will reply, oh, you have to open Maryland. So I guess they favored to just let it pass and just shut up about it and not make a big fuss, especially that the pandemic is here and nothing could be done by upsetting China, if I may say. So that's another reason. So China hold a lot of sway over the Western government as it currently stands. There is a lot, even this research in Wuhan was outsourced by the USA. There is a very well-known guy called Peter Zak from the Eco Health Institute. He has been in the news many times about the virus and the lab leak theory and defended the Chinese. And it proved that he was the subcontractor for the research that was done in that institute by this woman, the dubbed Batwoman, the director of the Wuhan, called Shi Zhengli. I think Dr. Price was referring to her, talking about a lot about the COVID and the pandemic in the media. And Peter Zak was the subcontractor for NIH and for what is called Fauci. Am I saying his name right or butchering his name? The director of the NIH. Fauci. Yeah. So Peter Zak of EcoHealth Alliance subcontracted the what paracentrically called gain of function research to Wuhan under the direction of Shi Zhengli, and this is a fact. So whether all this can make us, hold China to account, so that I guess we can't. The simple matter of fact that we can't. When you look at all these things, even the WHO went to China, visited the Wuhan lab for 3 hours and came out and said, we don't believe that the virus leaked from the lab. And WHO know that this is very poor science and they can't say that for sure with only 3-hour visits and without transparent access to all the documents and the samples and the practices that was running in this lab. Nevertheless, they said that. Why? Because China hold the biggest sway over WHO. So I guess that can answer your question, why we can't punish China and why we will never be able to do that.
Yep.
Yeah, we've created the monster. We've created the monster ourselves. So we it's not going to happen overnight. If this is going to change, it's going to take very, very long time, and we're going to have to start doing the right things. Like I as much as I disagree with Trump, but I think and here we go. This is where I think Bob and I are quite reasonable. I'm happy, even though I don't like a certain personality or a certain, but I have no problems at all admitting certain good things a person would have taken. And I did like the fact that he was bringing back manufacturing and certain industries back into the country and become less dependent on China. Actually, I don't mind that at all. I think it was a good move, and I think a lot of leaders should pursue that avenue.
It's the same with the situation in Ukraine. You know, we sort of did business with Putin, thought to get on the good side of him. Germany imported a lot of gas and oil from him, decommissioned their nuclear power station after Fukushima. There is a lot of things that take place at one point in time, and you discover few years down the track that is going to bite you in the butt. And this has happened with China. We outsource a lot of capacity to it, and now we are discovering that they hold a very big sway over us. And China is not Japan, is not South Korea, is not even Singapore. It's a communist regime, it's an authoritarian regime, and you can never do business with them thinking they will, you know, do the right and honorable thing further down the track. You do business with them, you outsource capacity to them, and you do it to your own perils, and you have to be cognizant of that, and you have to be smart to know that otherwise is not the case.
Very good, very good. Well, it seems that we've covered a lot of angles, and I'd like to thank you personally. My friend Dr. Magdi is a friend of mine, Bob, and he's a practicing medical doctor here in Australia, the state of Queensland, and he's my go-to man for things medicals. He's got very balanced, as you can see, approach about things. He's not leaning any way or one way or another, but he would look at situations based on merits and not hold a certain agenda or presumptives beforehand. So hopefully you enjoyed his input just like me.
Thank you for the opportunity, Hani, and thank you, Dr. Price, for giving me the opportunity to have a very nice chat with you. It was very enlightening and very mind-provoking, and certainly we agreed more than we disagreed, and it was so wonderful opportunity, and I'm so grateful for the chance you given me by Hani, and looking forward to plenty more to come.
Yeah, sure hope so.
I'm very happy that we're demonstrated once again to folks. I'm triple vaccinated. I'm about to take my 4th vaccine in a couple of months when it opens in Australia, because I'm about to travel to Europe in September. And I'm sitting with Bob, who doesn't want to take the vaccine, and we can have a conversation. We can have a conversation about this. He's not calling me a conspiracist. I'm not calling him a crackpot with the tinfoil hats, and you know, we're not doing that. We're trying to understand each other's point of view. He's trying to understand why we folks trying to take the vaccine and whether it's a real thing or not. And I am trying to understand his human right to choose not to take the vaccine and being able to deal with it. And it takes a lot of maturity for this to happen, because it's quite easy that we can jump on each other's case and say, hey, you're crazy, you're not, and then before we know it, we're not advancing any points other than just venting our spleen and other life frustrations on something completely irrelevant. So I'm very glad that we continue to have these opposing opinions conversations, where we find plenty of middle grounds.
And our assumption is that plenty of people would, if they would just have a dialogue, they would quickly discover that they have a lot in common.
Oh,
absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, folks. Anything, any statement you like to make, or Dr. Magdi or Robert, before we finish for today?
Oh, well, I guess I'm pretty much pontificated out.
Oh, it's all good.
No, I'll just reiterate my delight having the opportunity to chat with Dr. Price and with you, Hani, and it was really a very delightful chat, and I think we tackled a lot of things, and hope we answered a lot of questions, even for people who might listen later on for this podcast or stream. And yeah, certainly we'll be looking at the comment afterwards. If there is any questions we can shed more light on. And thanks for the opportunity by Dr. Price that he came and put his viewpoint. And certainly I would agree with the majority of his concern, and take it on board that is very valid and very relevant. And I would encourage him to continue to ask a question and be skeptical about everything. To even, I would be forgiven if we are quite inquisitive to the degree of being cynical. I mean, this is what advanced the freedom and the different point of view, and I can't be more on board with that.
Great
I'm
stuff.
glad you said that. It's always good to have a good word spoken on behalf of cynicism, because it's simply self-defense given the kind of world we live in.
Absolutely. Totally agree, Dr. Price.
Thank you very much, guys. I've really enjoyed this session. It has been a pleasure for me to discuss the topic with you, distinguished gentlemen, and for all our viewers and listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll see you in a fortnight. Next weekend, I am going to be away, so probably the next episode. So we have a bye next week, a bit of vacation from these intense conversations that Dr. Bob and myself usually have. And in a fortnight, I'm going to tee up a conversation about climate change, and I'll try to bring an expert to talk about the science behind it and whether it's really happening, or is it inflated, or the whole thing is made up. Thanks very much, and I hope you have a wonderful day and weekend ahead.
Yep.
Same.